A lot of major court developments this week, and Harry Littman, I need your help breaking it down. Everybody make sure you subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel. Donald Trump's court cases coming back into the news. You and I did another take about the Manhattan District Attorney criminal case and the developments that are happening there. Donald Trump's gag order. The request by Trump to remove the gag order was denied. Trump's trying to recuse the judge there. Also, things are now getting back on track in the Washington, D.C. federal criminal case against Donald Trump. Everybody remembers Judge Tanya Chutkan, the federal judge in that case. This was the case for Trump's attempt to overthrow the results of the free and fair election in 2020. Donald Trump filed the motion there on the basis of absolute presidential immunity. Judge Chutkan issued a very thoughtful order and a prompt order denying it. Trump appealed to the D.C. Circuit before a bipartisan panel of judges. They unanimously rejected Trump. He went to the Supreme Court. They gave him absolute presidential immunity and even more than what he was asking for. Now the requisite time period for the case to be sent back to the district court for further proceedings, given the Supreme Court's ruling, that's now taken place. In other words, it's a short way of saying the case now resumes before the D.C. federal criminal case with the ruling, though, of absolute presidential immunity. So special counsel Jack Smith, in his briefing, and the way the case is going to have to now go forward is it's going to have to be cognizant of what the Supreme Court said about absolute presidential immunity. And Jack Smith's going to have to argue, notwithstanding that ruling, the case can proceed because the conduct at issue is not official conduct, not core constitutional functions. Do we need to hold an evidentiary hearing on it? I want to get your take, Harry, because what's been interesting is actually this lull, this time period where there's been not a lot of action in his criminal cases, has allowed attention to be focused on his very dangerous and odd behavior and policies. And, you know, when he has these cases, he has those same talking points. He builds 4 talking points. He says them over and over again in the cases, and he doesn't have to talk about the race. So, you know, I'm wondering, number one, what do you think is going to happen in the D.C. case for the rest of this year? Do you think there's an evidentiary hearing that's going to happen? And then 2, I'd love to get your thoughts, though. If an evidentiary hearing doesn't happen and things go slower, is that at this stage, given the Supreme Court ruling, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because frankly, the more Donald Trump speaks like he did at the National Association of Black Journalists, the worse things get for him. What do you think?
Yeah. So again, you really put your finger on it. So look, you know, another 32-day period from the decision until it issues. But right now, that piece of paper is back in Judge Chutkan's hands, and she can act on the case again. Let me cut to the chase on your question. I don't think a whole lot is going to happen between now and the election. I think Trump will fight like mad to keep things from happening between now and the election. We have some colleagues who think maybe she'll hold an evidentiary hearing to try to see what survives, and that evidentiary hearing will, in miniature, have some of the kind of function of bringing home his pernicious conduct. You know, if Mike Pence takes the stand and says, "Here's what Trump told me to do," those are headlines that make him look bad. I think, though, the court's opinion first, he'll argue with some reason. It's such an incredibly expansive pro-Trump opinion that Chutkan is supposed to figure this out first on the allegations and not have an evidentiary hearing. And he can fight that, as he's fought so far, because it's immunity. He can bring an immediate appeal to the D.C. Circuit and immediate appeal to the Supreme Court. And my best guess is no evidentiary hearing. But your point's exactly the right one, because, you know, between the kind of the breaks he's had, not just the Supreme Court, but how the Fulton County case funny, well, sort of immolated, and then the nasty bit of In the Tank Business by Eileen Cannon. I think, and combined with all the hubbub over the election, I think we've kind of forgotten about the criminal cases. And guess what? They're not going anywhere. If he becomes president, it's a big problem, but it's always been a big problem. He's always been in a position to make them go away if he becomes president. If he doesn't, though, those cases come back and they are not going anywhere. And our sort of frenzy and focus, can we get this all done by November? We've lost that fight. And that means that it really is to the American people to make decisions, not relying on what a jury has done here or there. But it also means that Trump, already the convict, the legal hot water he's in is not going away. And I agree with you. You just think about, I mean, even in New York, he's going to get a long term of probation, I think. The Mar-a-Lago case, it's not leaving. This case, the Chutkan case, it will survive in some fashion. There'll be fights back and forth, and a lot of it, Jack Smith, we may find, I think the first thing that happens is Chutkan asks the parties, what's going on? What should I do next? Give me advice. And Smith at that point may decide to take chunks of the case, for example, the piece involving the Department of Justice that the Supreme Court as much as said can't go forward, but slim the case down and go forward with it. But there's no doubt, and some part of this case will remain, and it will remain the most sort of important judgment on Trump, because it goes to the heart of what has made him most pernicious as a president. The Mar-a-Lago case, Cannon dumped it, but it's not going away. The court, the Department of Justice can revive it in full fashion. That's a case where he is it is cut and dried against him, and the sentences are significant. So this 79, 80-year-old man who's already been convicted, if he pulls out the election, which has always been his strategy, we're in a world of hurt for many reasons. If he doesn't, though, he's back in the world of hurt, and we're not frenetic anymore about get it done by November. Justice can proceed slowly, but still it will proceed.
Harry, there's a lot of skirmishes or battles in the war that is a complex prosecution. And I think, you know this better than anyone as a top prosecutor. Ultimately, you got to win the war. You got to win the full battle, and there'll be days where you lose big motions. There'll be days where the court throws out the case, and then you got to go to the, Court of Appeals, or in the state courts, the appellate divisions. But ultimately, the question that good lawyers or prosecutors are faced with, though, is how do you react to adversity? Because it's always, you're never going to avoid it 100%, even if you're the best prosecutor. So do you approach adversity with a stable hand and don't get shook and have your moves and go through your motions? Or do you do what very frequently we see Trump and MAGA does, which is why they're bad decision makers, where they overreact, they do things that make the situation worse and unsalvageable. And one of the things in my observations of Jack Smith, where I totally understand the frustration that sometimes people have, why hasn't he gone to the Court of Appeals? Why hasn't he filed this emergency writ? Why hasn't he sought the recusal of Judge Kent? Why hasn't he made these moves? And I ultimately think it's because he's a lifelong, very successful prosecutor who views things through the prism of a continuum of time that may not be satisfying to a lot of us who want justice now, and rightfully so. But ultimately, I think he realizes that his efforts will be appreciated in the final victory versus potentially making a big blunder by acting hastily. What do you think?
And precipitous. It's so true. I mean, that's the trial lawyer's game, right? You get hit and you get knocked down, and you get up, and there are things that are unpredictable and the like. And look, he's moved with real dispatch, and he wanted, if he could, to bring things forward by November. But Eileen Cannon, what are you going to do? And the Supreme Court reaching down and then keeping it for their sweet time what are you going to do? And a good prosecutor at that point rolls with the punches. And this is a situation where, yes, the country was clamoring for a judgment before November, and no, the country won't get it, and they'll have to make up their own mind without this data. But, you know, the wheels of justice can grind slowly. Smith will move ahead, and the cases, even if, but, you know, however slimmed down the January 4th one gets, however kind of blown out of the water the Fulton County case gets, there are charges here. The January 6th case clearly survives in some fashion. Trump will fight it tooth and nail, but at the end of the day, it'll slim down, but it won't go away. And the Mar-a-Lago case, they're gonna want to reverse in the 11th Circuit. I think they will reverse, and then that case is just back where it was. And if he is not the president of the United States, he is looking at open and shut charges with no First Amendment argument, no complication. The guy is going to be convicted and get a sentence, and deservedly under the law, for a long time. And I agree, at that point, you know, you just sort of do the math. Even if, as people are now saying, oh, he'll run in 28, you know, he will be, if he doesn't win the presidency, there's just a very good chance that he's behind bars. That's just where we are now. And people have to remember that, as focused as we were on having things happen by November, and they haven't, it's not as if they've gone away.
Harry Litman, Talking Feds YouTube channel. Make sure you all check it out on your way to 500,000 subscribers. I'm one of the biggest fans of that channel. It's where I get my legal news. Helps fill in the gaps for me. So everybody check it out. Harry, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.